Hello, everybody. Gerald Brown here in another episode of Heavy in the Paint. I'm flying solo today. Rick Mahorn. You know what? I want him on the sideline because he's got to practice. And if he's going to make sure he has perfection. Talking about perfection, this week is all about Aaron Rodgers. And it's still, I guess you could say, fresh, still pain. And look, I'm not a Jets fan. I'm not going to make any bones about it. I'm a diehard Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. But one of the things you got to look at, this affected the whole NFL in terms of just the way teams, fans, there was a point in time that you only witnessed quarterbacks changing teams was at that stage of their late stage of their career where inevitably they were on their last legs, in terms of guys like Brett Favre. You would just see guys that just when he went to the Jets didn't look like they belonged, but just really playing out the last string, if you will, of their career. It was Tom Brady coming to my beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers that kind of opened up that door of renewed belief and hope that a team could get another team's franchise quarterback still in his prime to be able to take that team to higher heights that they had never reached before. And when you think about the New York Football Jets, it was a situation where, listen, the Yankees hadn't done anything. It was a terrible season. It has been. The Mets, same thing. You had the Giants go on national television and just get slaughtered by the Dallas Cowboys. And you had the Jets. The Jets were the darlings of the metropolitan area. I'm not even going to get into the whole thing with the Yankees and Mets. I already got that. But the Knicks, the Nets, so forth. They were supposed to be the darlings. And then the fourth play, only 4 snaps, Aaron Rodgers and the hopes of all of the Jets fans go down the drain. And that's a very, very sobering reality. It's a sobering understanding that at the end of the day, it's over for this season. As much as people want to sugarcoat it and give Robert Saleh, a lot of credit, for him to be a head coach. You're right. He's going to channel his inner Dick Vermeil. When they lost Trent Green, we will rally behind Kurt Warner, and this team will go forward. We will rally behind him. He said the rallying cry. Now, granted, Kurt Warner goes out, wins the Super Bowl. Arguably, there wasn't that much tape on him. Wasn't that much tape, and that's no disrespect to him. But now they turn the reins over to Zach Wilson, and he gets another opportunity. And I think clearly, winning cures all ills is the old saying. But when you look at that game, winning was kind of an afterthought, simply because the fact of the matter is the magnitude of the injury to Aaron Rodgers. And in all likelihood, I always say there's one thing about these guys that have calf injuries, a strained calf and all that stuff. That is something you always have to pay attention to. I can recall when you had Kevin Durant, who had a calf injury. He was trying to work, coming back. It was just all these things when he was with the Golden State Warriors. And it turned out tearing his Achilles. Whatever strain that you put on the muscle, the ligament gives out. It's just unfortunate. And beware, if you are a fan of, like I said, I'm so happy that the Cincinnati Bengals are not in desperation mode and have taken their time with Joe Burrow. And I'm fingers, toes, crossed, whatever. But anytime you have a player that has a calf injury, you can't rush those because clearly, and even then, you just never know. But hopefully it's a speedy recovery. And look, there's so many things that people are saying. That they need to get rid of the turf and the AstroTurf and that field and stuff. It was a contact play. The ground had nothing to do with it, in my humble opinion. Now, if he would have went back and stepped, yeah. But he's not 20. He's 39 years old, soon to be 40. That's the reality. Should they put grass in there? I believe so. If you think about the baseball stadiums, the Yankees and the Mets here in the tri-state area, they have natural grass. They have so many different things going there. I think this should be something that they put in place to solidify their athletes to be able to play at the best level as possible. But it just happened, and I mean, when you are a franchise that has known nothing but losing, and the word snake bitten, it's difficult to change the course. Look, God bless the Jets. They've tried so many different things, right? Drafting a quarterback, um, even going into the free agency market. But sometimes you got to go through the storms in order to get to the rainbow and the sunshine. And I think hopefully this will be the case with the Jets, but it doesn't take away the fact is their Super Bowl aspiration still a possibility? Yeah. Do I believe so? Absolutely not. And the first, and it's one thing that we have to stop. And I'm saying we, because as human people, this belief, and I know there's people in the business, and if you listen to me on Sirius XM NBA radio, as well as on Mad Dog Sports Radio, every Saturday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Sirius XM NBA radio, the Bottom Line Sports Show, it's the fact is that all of a sudden, not 24 hours had transpired that the notion of hearing Mr. Tom Brady's name, talking about, oh, he's the only guy that could save the season for the Jets. They should get on the phone and call Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady is that thirsty for success that he would forego his retirement, all the business ventures, and just uproot and say, oh. Now, I'm not saying I know Tom Brady personally. Maybe there's an inkling in his head. Yeah, he's a competitor. Fine. I'm not saying I know him. But at the end of the day, let's look at the logistics of that. Because when emotions are high, reason and logic are low. Number one, he's partial owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. So for ownership group to allow him and the owners collectively as a group of the NFL to allow Tom Brady to just basically say, hey, you can go ahead and play for the Jets. That's okay. That's absurd. Number two, he just was honored by the New England Patriots. His loyalty to the New England Patriots, his dying affection for the New England Patriots was on full display just Sunday, where he says he is a New England Patriot. Now he's going to forego all of that and jump into a team that's, oh, by the way, in the division of the New England Patriots. It's not happening. That's absurd. Doesn't make sense. And then, oh, by the way, what does that say to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? For him to do that, what would that say? So just to hear some of the absurd things, and no, Tom Brady, in all likelihood, he hasn't practiced. I mean, look, he's in great shape. God bless him. Has he been practicing? Maybe some calisthenics, but there's a difference between being in shape and football shape. To expect him to come out, ride in on a horse, and just save the day for the New York Jets, no. It's not like baseball. It's not like you can get a hired gun. And plus, he has a lot of hardware. His legacy is cemented. He doesn't need to go to the Jets. I think that was crazy to hear that. I think that you would have a better chance of getting maybe Vinny Testaverde to come out and play as opposed to Tom Brady. There's no connection to the Jets. There's none at all. The reason why he went to Tampa Bay and stuff like that, because again, he was out of their conference. He went to the NFC. And in all likelihood, people say when you get retired, you're one step retirement, you go to Florida. But he changed the culture. Special quarterback, but that's not happening. And we need to stop that and hear the foolishness that's transpired with that. Some of my highlights here on Heavy in the Paint, Gerald Brown flying solo. Some of the highlights from week one that I think are setting up to be the Cinderella story for the season thus far, because it's always interesting to take the moment or two to identify that team that will take that step and become the Cinderella when nobody's looking, nobody's really paying attention. I had said on this show last week with Rick Mahorn that I thought specifically the Detroit Lions, if they were ever going to restore the roar, they were going to have to come out and win in Kansas City for that first game, simply because the fact of the matter is it's a nationally televised game before Thanksgiving, number one. Number two, doing it in front of that audience, a national audience, would automatically send a message to say, hey, we could put them on national television because the fans will watch it. Number three, which is actually a part of number two, mainstream and networks and now the national media can say, well, listen, let's keep an eye on them because if need be, we can watch them on TV because everybody loves the underdog. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. Everybody loves an underdog. When it comes to professional sports, a lot of times, even in life, you love an underdog. That's why Rocky Balboa, a fictional character, resonated with so much with people. Everybody loves an underdog. And when you think about the Detroit Lions, they have been underdogs. They have been underdogs. But now they get off to a nice start with a super win in Kansas City and starting their season off. I think their win and the unbelievable ride of the Colorado Buffaloes and Deion Sanders in college football are perhaps maybe the two big Cinderella storylines now in professional sports. Yeah, you say college football is not professional sports. I call it what it is, professional sports. But that's another story for another day. But when I look at the Lions, that win solidified everything that Dan Campbell, their head coach, and that coaching staff has been preaching. It solidified their run last year and continued. It solidified the fact that the matter is they have confidence. They can win in this league. And that NFC North division is wide open, right? Minnesota, yeah, my beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers went into Minnesota, took them out of their misery, and looked at Kirk Cousins and said, you know what? He might be the next quarterback that's on a move. But again, on a lower scale, that's again another story for another day. But because of the fact is that when you look at Minnesota losing, Chicago not ready yet, Green Bay, Jordan Love taking care of their business, and then you have the Detroit Lions. I think the Lions, if they go into week 2 and they are able to upset and beat the Seattle Seahawks, they're going to be 2-0. 2-0. Yes, they haven't had any divisional games, but you can't help but go ahead and root for the Detroit Lions. And I mean, they have to be the number one story, in my humble opinion, going into week 2, simply because the fact is, yes, if Aaron Rodgers wouldn't have gotten hurt, that would be the big story right there. The success of the Detroit Lions thus far in week 2. Number 2, some of the other storylines that I'm going to be following is the panic in Cincinnati. Is it time to start panicking? Oh my God, they were manhandled by the Cleveland Browns. They were manhandled by Myles Garrett. I'm saying there's no panic. There's no panic at all in Cincinnati. However, after 1 week, it sets up a must-win for their home opener against the Baltimore Ravens. Why? Because clearly it's all about divisional games. And I look at the AFC North division as possibly the toughest division in all of football, simply because the fact of the matter is you go from top to bottom, from Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, as well as Baltimore. And arguably that whole division could essentially be in the playoffs. And they could be not only in the playoffs, but have deep playoff runs. And now you have a situation where, yes, last year, look, Cincinnati did the same thing, slow start. What happened? They got to the AFC Championship game. They are a team that, as crazy as it may sound, they know how to win. They know how to manage a season. There shouldn't be a sense of panic. However, the reason why I'm calling this a must-win game in week 2, it's a second divisional game. And also, Sober in effect is the fact of the matter is they have struggled recently playing against the Cleveland Browns. They have struggled against certain matchups. So Cleveland, it gives them all the problems in the world. And I'm not looking at this as saying, you know what, you should excuse that. But Joe Burrow didn't play in the preseason. Joe Burrow was nursing that calf injury. So, yes, timing is off. There should be rust, but I don't think it's any panic. But you do not want to go down 0-2 in that division and losing to Baltimore in Cincinnati. And granted, Baltimore is not a sort of cakewalk, but I like the matchup between the Bengals and the Ravens. Clearly, you know what? The Ravens getting that first victory out of the way. But still, that's going to be a division that is arguably must see TV because each team in that division on any given Sunday can really essentially look like a team that is primed for a deep playoff run. Number three, here in Heavy in the Paint, Gerald Brown breaking down week 1 of the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys, are they for real? Are they a product of a poorly put together team? And I'm going to have to lean to a product of a poorly put together team and the New York Giants, right? Now, a lot of people say poorly put together. Well, here's the thing. Daniel Jones is clearly showing that he is not ready for prime time. Saquon Barkley arguably is their best offensive player, but unfortunately, he does not play a position that was required to be in a situation to control that offense, and that being quarterback. And the way the Giants looked, I think, lent to how tantalizing, how exciting the Dallas Cowboys looked. Yes, they were dominant, but you had one team that had a lot of talent and was able to produce on the football field, and another team that on paper it's, when I looked at them. Clearly, I look at the Dallas Cowboys, the jury's still out. And it's always been that way for the Dallas Cowboys in recent years because it's all this. It's a lot of talk. But when you measure them up against some of the top tier teams in the league, on paper, they look very, very good. But can they beat the San Francisco 49ers? No. Can they beat some of the other teams in that division that will possibly be in contention for a playoff spot, let alone a Super Bowl? I don't know. The jury's still out for me and the Dallas Cowboys. And look, the Cowboys Nation and all their illustrious fans and stuff will say, oh, you're crazy, you're hating. Maybe I am hating because the Dallas Cowboys ended Tom Brady's illustrious career. That word came up again. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting. They're playing a New York Football Jets team on week 2, and that's going to be really interesting. Now, that defense, once again, when I look at Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson, there's not that much of a difference. So I'm looking at this arguably as a repeat somewhat of a performance, depending on how they're going to be aggressive against the Jets and Zach Wilson. They're going to really try to speed up his decision-making process. And it will be interesting to see now that reality has set in for the Jets. The whole world knows Aaron Rodgers is not playing this season. How will they respond? So, it works out well for the Cowboys, and no disrespect, but it's not their fault. They're playing certain teams and all these different things. But I look at their 2 weeks right there. I don't know if that will give anybody, let alone me, a strong, strong indication of how great this team is, how talented they can be. If there are the perennial Super Bowl favorites, no. I look at this, and I'm going to say the Cowboys in their home opener dominant over the Jets. And this is a product of the Aaron Rodgers effect not being there. Also, too, and just going back to Aaron Rodgers, like I had said before, you think about how this schedule was set up for the Jets to be highlighted and showcased on the national networks. Because, again, everybody loves the underdog, but you got the new shiny toy, if you will. Like with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had Tom Brady, they were featured several times, and I loved it on national television. Now the Jets are going to be featured several times on national television. And this is one of their sort of games right here, playing against the Cowboys, Aaron Rodgers. It was supposed to be a mega game. But at the end of the day, it'll be Zach Wilson and the New York Jets versus the Dallas Cowboys. And who knows? Dak Prescott might be that next quarterback in line to be a Jet somewhere down the line in a couple years. As we clearly know, they'll move on to Trey Lance at some point. The Miami versus New England game in week 2. Now, both situations where the Miami Dolphins, I look at them and look what they did against the Chargers. I don't measure that. I mean, it's great, yeah, but the Chargers are just that team that's missing something. Can't put my finger on it at all. What are they missing? I don't know. You have Justin Herbert. You have a lot of the pieces. Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen. You have a lot of the pieces. That defense, Joey Bosa, it's just something missing and clearly evident. Give kudos to Tua Tagovailoa as well as Tyreek Hill and the Miami Dolphins team going on the road and winning. Now it sets up a New England Patriots game where you're going into Foxborough. Yes, you want to go there at this time of the year because it's not going to be that cold. And obviously coming from southern Florida, it's a situation where the weather will be still relatively bearable and comparable to South Florida. But at the end of the day, I look at New England, again, kind of in a similar situation with the Cincinnati Bengals. Divisional games really matter. Really matter. Now, obviously, Aaron Rodgers taking a step back. He's not there. The Jets will likely take a step back. So now it's a situation, who's that number two team? Who's that number 2 team in that division? Who's the top dog? It's got to be probably Buffalo. And they don't have a game to sneeze at against the Las Vegas Raiders. But when I look at the Miami Dolphins and the New England Patriots, Matt Jones is still trying to establish himself. Do they have their quarterback to replace Tom Brady? Those are some of the questions that have to be answered. And when I look at the Patriots, you don't want to go down Bill Belichick 0-2 in that division, although the Jets have taken a step back. So this is a must win for the Patriots. And at the same time, the Miami Dolphins. You want to go in. This is a first official divisional game. Divisional games really matter. And it's something that has to be looked at. So again, I said this is a must win for the New England Patriots. But at the end of the day, do they have an answer for Tyreek Hill? And Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they are problems. And they're only going to get better. And Tua Tagovailoa, God bless him. For him to come back and he's healthy, and I hope he stays healthy, but to be able to go out there and to play the way he played against the Los Angeles Chargers really says a lot. Who's real? Who's fake? I always love to hear that song because, again, put it in context. When I talk about the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of them is real. The other one is fake. I don't know. When I look at the Cleveland Browns, yes, they've owned the Cincinnati Bengals in the Battle of Ohio. They've owned them. But now you're playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I looked at their first game. Mike Tomlin said, listen, we're not going to sit around and let guys rest. We're going to play guys in the preseason. If you're going to get ready for a boxing match, you have to spar, was the sort of line which resonated with me. But you go out and lay an egg against the San Francisco 49ers, a team going west to east, and lay an egg at home. That was a little concerning. However, now you're playing a Cleveland Browns team that at the end of the day, divisional games really matter. Cleveland, Deshaun Watson, he was doing the guitar. He was doing all that. It was great. Myles Garrett, all of that. But I've always felt that Cleveland, if they're ever going to prove themselves, it's got to be one thing. They got to beat the ghost of the past, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have owned and dominated that division along with the Baltimore Ravens. And it'll be very interesting to see how and what the Pittsburgh Steelers do. And if they're in a situation, think about it. Cleveland goes in there, and let's say if Cleveland loses, they're 1-1, right? The sky's not falling whatsoever. But can you imagine if the Pittsburgh Steelers lose to the Cleveland Browns? I don't care if it's in Cleveland or in Pittsburgh. Can you imagine the Steelers starting 0-2, but more importantly, losing a divisional game? And granted, they will happen. They will happen. But how interesting, the dynamic. Will the panic button be sound and pressed if the Pittsburgh Steelers are 0-2 to start the season? I'm not saying Mike Tomlin is definitely not on the hot seat. They don't do that in Pittsburgh, but it bears watching to see exactly what type of team the Pittsburgh Steelers, and are they officially in rebuild mode? Are they going to have to go back to the drawing board? You know, so much has been made of Kenny Pickett and all this other stuff. Is he the answer? So that is another game that I'll definitely be watching. And then another game that I'll be watching, and I'm going to pick and stuff and, look at these games, is the Washington versus Denver. Now, Sean Payton was the new shiny toy. He stuck his chest out and said, hey, you know what? I'm Sean Payton. I'm coming to Denver, and I'm going to save the day, and I'm going to get Russell Wilson all back in alignment, and it's all going to be good, and we're going to get back to the glory days of the Denver Broncos. They lost game one. And why I thought that game was so impactful is because when you've had losses, when you've had disasters, and you bring in a coach that's high profile like Sean Payton, you always want to get that first game out the gateway, that first W. You don't want to wait. And now they're playing against a Washington Commanders team who got their victory at home, but they're starting a rookie quarterback. And we know that the defense of the Denver Broncos is very talented. We know that that team is effective. But the question that still remains the same is that, look, Jerry Jeudy didn't play for the Denver Broncos. I get that. But when I look at the Denver Broncos, I'm still not sold on Russell Wilson. You're in that division on paper, and I'm looking at that division. Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, on paper, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Russell Wilson. Now, Garoppolo, okay, but they won. They figured out a way to win. Is he a game manager? I like to think so. He's a guy that can come in there, not essentially lose you the game, but definitely do the things that's necessary to help your team win. And then obviously Patrick Mahomes is GOAT in waiting. And so if he's the GOAT in waiting, where does Russell Wilson fit? Justin Herbert, a lot of potential, but you don't win. So I don't think that at the end of the day, that's something that you really can rely on. But when I look at the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson, this guy was an MVP not too long ago. And he just seems like he hasn't returned back to that form. And I've always said, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, is the old proverbial saying. And the whole talk of, I got to get out of Seattle, I'm this, I'm that, and going to Denver, let's ride, all these things. It hasn't parlayed into long-term success. And it's just a question of, if this team, the Broncos, lose to the Commanders, it's going to be a sense of panic. And I think it's still early. And it's always, on one hand, you can say it's early. But on the other hand, it is not early. It's not too early to start panicking, especially when playoff spots are already up for grab. And the further you fall in that hole, the harder and the longer it takes to get to the top. And a lot of the times, that's when you're relying on other teams. That's when we're relying on so many things. So I'm taking Denver in this game. Always remember, Heavy in the Paint, 2 episodes in. I did it solo, but the big fella, you know what? He will be back next week. Got guests coming galore. So much to think about, so much to talk about, and so much to witness. We're going to be football heavy, but we're not ignoring the NBA. We're not ignoring Major League Baseball. We'll have it all covered right here. Heavy in the Paint. This is Gerald Brown signing off. Get ready for week 2 of the NFL. And Jet fans, just keep hope alive. Peace.